Weekends of the year with more than 60 people shot over the weekend, a third of them under the age of 17.
Chicago faces an epidemic of gun violence. This year alone, more than 2,100 people have been shot, more than 400 killed.
We're going to take you now to Chicago, where this past weekend at least 52 people were shot, 8 of them killed in a wave of violence across the city.
13. With that shit, you get that shit.
And it's a lot of ways to get caught. Mistaken identity, anything. It ain't gotta be what this is. There's innocent bystanders getting killed in this shit every day, man. That's why you gotta keep the stuff.
You gotta keep something.
I like keep some big shit in case a nigga try me, I'ma cook his ass.
Call Shaq, boy, you let the bag blow these bobber niggas like Osama.
Cray, my young nigga.
K.I., my young killer. A lot of niggas be rapping, but we the ones tote guns, nigga.
These EBT ass niggas right here, man. Fuck them. Yeah. Squad shit, bitch.
I'm from STL, but I be posted on EDT, bitch.
Jakira Barnes, a.k.a. K.I., was born on January 21st, 1997, in Chicago, Illinois, to her mother, Chantel Brown. Before she would even turn 1 year old, she would lose her father. He was shot in the head with an AK-47 in front of his home. Some people say it's because he was a gang leader in the city of Chicago, but K.I.'s mom said that that's not true. K.I. would witness one of her brothers being murdered in front of her when she was very young, and death would become a common theme in her life. She also had a brother by the name of George Barnes, aka G.I. Joe, and they were very close. Growing up, K.I. seemed to be a normal girl. She enjoyed hanging out with her friends. She had boyfriends, and she was an honor roll student. She had dreams of becoming a social worker and helping out less fortunate kids. She attended Perspectives, IIT, Math and Science Academy. But in the middle of her 9th grade year, there was a change in K.I. Her grades were slipping. She was having behavioral issues at school and on certain neighborhoods that they were beefing with, while she would go at the bigger targets. 800, TYMB, 300 in Lamron, and especially O-Block. Anybody could get it. It was a war going on, and in K.I.'s mind, she was a soldier. But in war, there are casualties, and Tuckerville would lose another member by the name of Marlon Monroe, aka Little Doc, because on April 28, 2012, the 23-year-old Little Doc was walking home from work on the 6300 block of South St. Lawrence Avenue when a gunman leaned out of a vehicle and sprayed up the block, striking Little Doc in the chest. The Chicago PD would arrive on scene to collect evidence. They collected shell casings and anything else that they could see. They collected everything except Little Doc. He laid there in the tall weeds, dead, for hours, until a 16-year-old boy stumbled upon his body and called the police again, and they finally came and got him. In the months that followed, Tuckerville and O-Block would relentlessly diss each other online, clowning each other's dead homies. And when it came to O-Block, they liked to diss one STL EBT member in particular, one of K.I.'s best friends, Shondell Gregory, aka Tuka. And on September 25th, 2012, a fight would take place on the train that would forever tie K.I. to one of her biggest rivals, Davon Bennett, aka King Von. They started to fight as soon as they seen each other on the train. King Von would punch K.I. in the face multiple times. Then he would take to Twitter to let everybody know what he did to her. K.I. would acknowledge what happened, but said she only has a bruise on her face, but it's all good because her 40 cal could leave a hole in King Von's face. And a few days later, K.I. would tweet directly at King Von to let him know that she had just beat up a member of O-Block on the train. One of Von's friends, named Little Scud, King Von would acknowledge these tweets by saying that K.I. wasn't no lame and how he think he's in love with her. And K.I. would diss King Von in response, but that didn't faze him. He told K.I. that he wanted to wife her up and how he would treat her right. And on October 5th, 2012, King Von would begin to direct message K.I., telling her how much he liked her and how much he wanted to get with her. At first, K.I. would reject his advances, but Von would stay persistent, and eventually, she started to open up to him. She even asked him about a rumor that she heard that O-Block wanted her dead and that she was a top priority. King Von would tell her, "Yeah, there are people in O-Block that want you dead, but I don't think I could pull the trigger." He said that he liked her too much. He told her that he had a gun on him when she seen him on the train, and there was another time that they ran into each other and King Von was strapped, so if he really wanted to get to her, he could have done it those times. Von would also tell K.I. that after the gang wars were over, that they could be together. K.I. would ask King Von how long did he plan on gangbanging, in which King Von would respond by saying that he couldn't see himself doing anything else, that he loved his guys too much, and that he could never leave them behind. One thing that K.I. and King Von could agree on is that they both felt that they would die in the streets, in the Chicago gang wars. But even though they would have moments of being cordial and somewhat respectful to one another, they were still enemies, and dissing would always come into play.
A massive police presence between Eberhard and Rhodes on 63rd. Patrol cars, blue lights flashing after a police-involved shooting.
He got shot 7 times on Rhodes, right there by the police.
Friends say 19-year-old Rasan Shah had just left them to get something to eat.
He was running through the alley with no gun or nothing, because he just left us, so we know he ain't had no gun. The police shot him unjustified. Too many times in his back. He ain't do nothing, man.
The death of Little B destroyed K.I.'s spirit. She completely broke down at the funeral, and now that K.I. was in pain, she wanted her enemies to be in pain too, especially Chief Keef, who had been dissing Tuka for many years, but he had long ago left Chicago for sunny Los Angeles and rap stardom, but he still had family ties in the city, and K.I. would take full advantage of this, because in the early morning hours of April 10th, 2014, 30-year-old Mario Hess, aka Blood Money, and a cousin of Chief Keef, was sitting in front of his family's home in West Inglewood when he was approached by a gunman and shot multiple times. Just 2 weeks prior to his death, he signed a deal with Interscope Records, and he did interviews talking about how he had big plans for the future. But unfortunately, those plans would never come to fruition. K.I. would let it be known that she was responsible for the death of Blood Money, but not even the death of her enemies could heal her heart. She would take to social media to talk about her pain and everything that she had been through in her life and all of the friends that she had lost. She even made a post about her dad and how she knew that she would be a better person if he was around. According to K.I.'s mom, she tried to talk to her daughter about everything that was going on, but when she looked her daughter in the eyes, she could already tell that her soul was gone, and her mother's intuition would be proven correct, because on April 11th, 2014, K.I. would make a fatal mistake. She would tweet out her location for everybody to see, including her enemies. She was walking on the 6400 block of South Eberhard. She was with FBG Butter and Spoon from Gyro City. They were headed over to Wooski's house to celebrate Boss Trail's birthday, when a gunman hopped out of a vehicle, waved a few bystanders who was in his path out of the way so he could have a clear shot, and began to fire at K.I. and her friends. Her 2 friends would be hit, one in the foot, one in the knee, and K.I., she was hit 9 times, in the chest, neck, and in the jaw. After being shot, she would stumble to a nearby home where she laid on some steps, and she would take her last breath, ending the life of the most deadly female assassin in Chicago gangland history.
Always apart, always acting wild when you should be doing what you told. You was never one of us. You never could be. How my hair look, Mike?
You look good, girl.
Following the news of her death, K.I.'s enemies would take to social media and rejoice and celebrate her demise. In Tuckerville, they would vow to get revenge. Right after K.I.'s murder, 36 people would be shot in a 36-hour period, along with 4 people losing their lives. There were 2 prime suspects in the murder of K.I., with one of them being Antron Young, aka Big A from O Block. He would take to the internet and let it be known about his involvement in K.I.'s death. Andy would change his social media handle from Big A to Big Aski, meaning Ask K.I. But in the early morning hours of December 4th, 2016, Big A entered a Sammy's Grill on South King Drive. But while inside, an altercation occurred that resulted in him being shot in the face, dead at only 23 years old. Some people say that this had nothing to do with K.I.'s death and it was a completely separate situation. But there's also a theory that it was 2 members from Tuckerville, DeAndre Wallace, aka Can't Get Right, and George Barnes, aka G.I. Joe, K.I.'s brother. Some believe that he was the one that got get back for his slain sister. And the second prime suspect in K.I.'s murder was none other than King Von. On April 24th, 2014, he will be arrested and held for questioning, but ultimately, the state would reject the case due to lack of evidence, and King Von would walk free. But just a few weeks later, King Von would be arrested again for a different murder, that of 19-year-old Malcolm Stuckey, who was killed after attending a party in the Inglewood neighborhood. King Von would spend the next 3 years in prison fighting this case, but in 2017, after a 5-day trial, he would be found innocent and once again set free. But once he was released, he went right back to doing what he did best, drilling. There's a famous Instagram live with King Von and members of O Block going back and forth with members of Tuckerville, with King Von saying that they had a surprise coming for him and that it was coming soon. On October 22nd, 2018, there was a funeral being held at Burnside Church for a 25-year-old man by the name of Vantrese Chris, aka Dusky the Man. There were members of Tuckerville in attendance, but as the service was being let out, a car pulled up and started shooting into the crowd, hitting 6 people, including FBG Wooski with an almost fatal shot to the head.
Back to the shooting that happened on 92nd and Cottage Grove. At least 6 people were shot as they were leaving Bethlehem Star Missionary Baptist Church. Friends and families gathered for the funeral service of Chicago rapper Vantrese R. Chris, who went by the name Dusky the Man. Chris was shot on October 9th. He was taken to the hospital where he later died. The victims in yesterday's shooting range from 18 to 27 years old, males and a female. The most critical, a 21-year-old shot in the head.
King Von would let it be known that him and the Get Back gang were responsible for the brazen act. But King Von wouldn't have to be in the streets for too much longer, because legendary Chicago rapper Lil Durk would take him under his wing and begin to groom him to become a rap superstar. And he would release a string of hits, quickly becoming one of the hottest rappers in the game. But even during his time at the top, he would still talk about K.I., dissing her in songs and on social media, along with other murders that he claimed that he committed, doing math, counting up the bodies.
Talk about bodies, I got a few, 4 + 3, 3 + 2, I'm King Von. Need no bean to make you bleed, nigga. Body count so ugly, I remind you of that scream, nigga. Bleed. You can't stand them. What? Body count so ugly, still handsome. Don't pop my chain, but dance. Let's talk bodies, I got 7. They stop me at the airport cause I keep that metal.
And the story of King Von and K.I. would get even more interesting in 2019 when the TV network A&E filmed a documentary titled Secret Life of a Gang Girl, The Untold Story. And during this documentary, they interviewed King Von, but from the tone of the interview, it seems as if A&E was under the impression that King Von was a man in love with K.I., obsessed with being with her, not knowing that they may have been interviewing a man obsessed with taking her life.
I was trying to first. I was like, damn, you and shit.
The exact text was something along the lines of, when it's all over with, I'm gonna get up in you or something. Does that sound about right?
That sound raw, so yeah, I'll be saying raw. Yeah, I probably did say that.
But King Von's ride at the top wouldn't last for too much longer. He had tension with superstar Louisiana rapper NBA Youngboy, who had beef with Lil Durk and OTF.
Fuck Youngboy talking about on this song, bro.
What?
He talking crazy on this man.
Oh, yeah?
He ain't even like that.
Oh!
On his ass now.
On his
All that cap. You got cap in your raps.
Go straight, boss. Don't hit the white lady.
You got cap in your raps.
But in the early morning hours of November 6, 2020, that tension would escalate into a fight outside of a hookah lounge in Atlanta between King Von and Georgia rapper Quando Rondo, who was signed to NBA Youngboy. And this fight would result in King Von being shot multiple times, ending the life of the O-Block legend. 1 year after his death, the Chicago PD began to release documents listing King Von as the murderer in multiple cases, including that of Jakira Barnes, officially ending the chapter of King Von versus K.I. In the years following the death of her daughter, K.I.'s mom has gotten together with other mothers in Chicago who have lost their children to violence. FBG Duck's mom, Tuka's mom, amongst others, trying to bring some peace and light to such a tragic and dark situation. There's a stigma that black kids in poor communities choose the gang life simply because they're more prone to violence. They want easy money, street credibility, and internet clout. And for some, that very well may be true. But there's also a number of young kids that choose the gang life to receive something they feel they never had before: love and family. Even if that love is coming from a cold street and that family is giving you a hug while handing you a gun to put in work. And if K.I. was raised in a different environment under different circumstances, maybe her life would have turned out different for the better, but we'll never know. And Jakira Barnes, she was only 17 years old when she died. Rest in peace.